You are listening to continuing coverage of the trial of Chad Daybell from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast. Let's go back to the courtroom.
Consideration. I'll go ahead and call the case. I just want to let everybody know. All right. We're on the record on CR 22211623, State versus Chad Daybell. Mr. Daybell's here present, represented by counsel Mr. Pryor. The prosecution's here as well. Prior to bringing the jurors in and the public into the courtroom this morning, we had a request over the weekend for an exigent hearing this morning. In order to not keep jurors held longer than necessary, we're conducting this hearing first before the public's allowed into the courtroom, but the court is live streaming the hearing for that public access. So just to clarify one point, as the trial goes along, I don't mind doing exigent hearings. These things come up and we'll do them. However, there still needs to be, whenever possible, a motion filed so it can be lodged in the case, even if it's just a quick one-page motion notifying the parties in the court of what the topic will be. So we did this based off an email received, but it's a request from the defense to reconsider a ruling that was made last week on evidence as it related to the defense request to bring in testimony or evidence relating to Joe Ryan. The court made a ruling last week that it was inadmissible as being irrelevant, and Mr. Pryor, I understand you wanted to get a further either clarification or another opportunity to argue that point. Is that something you want to argue this morning?
Judge, I would like to argue it. And Judge, would the court prefer I go to the podium or can I argue from here?
I think it's best if you just stay at counsel table, so
Okay.
the microphone will pick that up.
And may I, Judge, proceed?
Yes.
Judge, it's really a two-prong argument. One, I wanted to make a record of the fact that the court had ruled that the evidence relating to Joseph Ryan and that Alex Cox had committed an aggravated assault felony on Joseph Ryan, and that Mr. Ryan feared for his life. That was in 2007. Judge, I have a probable cause affidavit from that particular jurisdiction relaying the facts of that particular incident. I would point out, Judge, that part of our argument is that Alex Cox's modus operandi was to protect Lori Vallow whenever there was any sort of discernible threat towards her or any kind of threat towards her. Alex Cox would come to the rescue and engage in this kind of conduct. As an example, Judge, this is our position is that's exactly what happened with Charles Vallow. That's exactly what happened with Brandon Boudreaux. And those occurred in, I believe, 2019. Approximately 12 years earlier in 2007, the same modus operandi. And the difficulty, Judge, and the relevance in my mind is that we are looking at a third husband. The third husband, this was just not some random act. This was a third husband of Lori Vallow who was subjected and put in a position of fear. And then the fourth husband from the defense, and I think the state would agree, Alex Cox perpetrated a murder upon the fourth husband, Charles Vallow. And the modus operandi, Judge, and that's where I think this comes in, is that Alex Cox is a protector of Lori Vallow. And I realized that the state had got a transcript of my opening statement. I didn't recall seeing a motion or an order requesting that they be allowed to do that. But lo and behold, I was provided a transcript of my opening statement, and I did adhere to that, Judge. And I don't think it was something that I have to file a 404B to ask permission to do that. Quite to the contrary, 404B requires a prosecuting attorney to file motions, and it's at the end of 404B that's required. The state does, or the defense does not have the burden to do that. And in my mind, this was relevant, and it was relevant to Alex Cox's behavior, modus operandi, in how he took care of, and he was the protector, or whatever adjective you want to use, of Lori Vallow. So at this point, Judge, I just wanted to make a record that that's what my position is.
All right. I'll hear any argument from the state on whether or not the court's previous ruling excluding that evidence should stand or be reconsidered.
Thank you, Your Honor. The state agrees with the court's previous ruling. We don't think that this set of facts meets the 401 test that of relevancy. It has no tendency to make a fact more or less probable than it would be without the evidence in this case. The reason for that is that this is so attenuated by time. I believe this was a 2007 incident dealing with an individual who, other than being the father of one of the victims in this case, has no other connection to this defendant. So you have this very long section of time in between that creates this attenuation. We think there's going to be a foundational issue as well. I don't think a PC affidavit in and of itself comes in. We believe that's hearsay. There needs to be a declarant to talk about it. And so based on those two, based on that, and on just there's a case, Pomrenke versus State 169 Idaho 474, and I think it applies here. The holding there is that proffered evidence is irrelevant if it tends to disprove or disprove a fact of consequence only through speculative inferences. And I think that's where this is speculative inferences, that because Alex Cox may or may not have done something to Joe Ryan back in 2007, that he is somehow that somehow removes this defendant's guilt in this case. So we do not think it passes the 401 test. And again, we think there's a foundational issue. So we'd ask the court to just affirm its previous ruling.
And Judge, if I could respond just
Yes.
ever so briefly. Judge, there is no time limit on bringing up these allegations that I'm aware of that limits these allegations or says they're not relevant because they occurred a certain number of years ago. This is a co-conspirator. And that's what's very important here. That's what's extremely important. Is part of the case that the prosecutor has to show is that Mr. Daybell, Chad, engaged in a conspiracy with Alex Cox and Lori Vallow, and then other unknown or unnamed co-conspirators. However, if Alex Cox took it upon himself to engage in conduct at the bequest of Lori Vallow, or not at the bequest of Lori Vallow, to protect her or to inflict harm on another person, it's not a leap to say at this point, Alex Cox previously acted on his own. Alex Cox acted on his own with Charles Vallow. Alex Cox acted on his own with Brandon Boudreaux. And if the state has to prove that Chad Daybell was involved in a conspiracy with Tammy Daybell, JJ Vallow, and Tylee, it's absolutely relevant that Alex Cox, in his previous behavior, his modus operandi was to act on his own and to lash out and do things on his own. I couldn't think of something that's more relevant in this regard. And I just felt very strongly, Judge, that the court had not thought this through. Now, I understand we're all under the gun, and I agree there's been a number of motions filed, and we are scrambling, and that's not unusual given these circumstances. And the court had to make a decision very quickly and was under the gun. But I just felt that I wanted to give the court an opportunity to hear out my argument and put it on the record so the court could look at this and say, okay, this is how I feel about this. And that was really the purpose of this, Judge. And if the court needs me to file a motion, Judge, to reconsider, I can do a one-page motion to reconsider just so we have a clear record of this, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. On that last point, I won't, on this issue, require a motion to be filed, knowing that it's on the record now, brought up, and will be noted in the court minutes as a motion heard this morning. So the court has reviewed the defense request that information relating to this 2007 incident be brought into this case. It gets into 404B type issues. I don't know that it actually is 404B, which, as pointed out by the defense here, really has some notice requirements and things that seem to be exclusive to requirements of what a prosecutor needs to do under 404B. The notice provision does specifically indicate what a prosecutor is required to do in order to provide notice. So there is one, and noting subsection 2, in a criminal case, the prosecutor must, and then it's got an A and B on notice. So without determining here, because I don't think it's necessary, whether or not the defense would be required to provide the same reasonable type of notice as a prosecutor, the real issue at stake is whether or not, in this case, this 2007 incident has enough relationship to the charges at hand to become relevant or admissible evidence under Rule 401. The court would note that there is a conspiracy charged in multiple counts here involving Alex Cox, and the dates that are alleged in the indictment are alleging a conspiracy that occurred on or between October 26, 2018 and the year 2020. So the earliest date the state is alleging is 2018. This would be an incident that was approximately 11 years before, I should say, to clarify, Mr. Pryor, but 11 years beforehand. And I do have to look at how attenuated that is from the facts here. While there may be some relevance, the real question is, under 403, is this relevance that is more probative than unfairly prejudicial? The state's raised questions on foundation. How does evidence come in of this event that happened now 17 years ago? Who would lay the foundation to really get any of that evidence in if it starts coming in and the state wants to challenge the defense theory? Also, while Alex Cox is a named co-conspirator, Joe Ryan's not listed as a victim in the case. And the court just finds that under looking at 403 balancing test and Rule 401, I'm going to maintain the ruling that this is simply too far outside of the scope of the charges, too far outside of the scope of the alleged conspiracy, would be more prejudicial than probative, and without adequate time or even possibly way to establish a foundation to allow a response from the state would be unfairly prejudicial as well. So having considered that, then the court is going to maintain that previous ruling that the incidents alleged as they relate to Joe Ryan and Alex Cox will be inadmissible during the trial, and that will be the court's ruling. So, Mr. Pryor, I'll ask you to refrain from further references to that based on this evidentiary ruling. Any questions on that, Mr. Pryor?
No, Judge.
All right. Any questions from the state?
No.
Okay. Thanks, counsel. We'll go off the record here momentarily then. While everybody gets ready, I'll step off the bench. We'll let the public come in, and we will let the jurors in. I'll let everyone know we do have all 18 jurors returned today. They've each signed their affirmation, so they are good to go to hear evidence this morning. And as soon as the public's seated, let me know, and we'll come back on and get started with evidence. Let me just ask the state, who's the witness that's going to be coming up today first?
The first will be Vince Kayakamanu.
Okay.
All right. Stephen W. Boyce.
Thank you. Please be seated. Good morning. We're on the record on case CR 22211623, State of Idaho versus Chad Daybell. We're continuing with evidence today. The court would note I heard a motion argued this morning without the public in the courtroom, but that was an open hearing that was live streamed on an evidentiary issue. I understand at this time the state's ready to proceed with its case in chief and call a next witness. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. I will note the state is here present as well as the defendant, and counsel for the defendant, Mr. Pryor. Is the defense ready to proceed with evidence? Very well. Please instruct the bailiffs then to have the jurors brought in.
All right. The jury is present and valid.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bailiff. Please be seated. All right. We are back on the record on case CR 22211623. The jurors have all returned. The court has confirmed each of them also signed their declaration and acknowledgement that they followed the court's admonishment to not investigate or look into the case over the break. So thank you very much, each of you, for following that instruction during that long weekend break. The state is continuing with its case in chief and presenting evidence. I'll note the defendant and counsel are present, as well as the prosecution for the state. And I'll also note this hearing is being live streamed today. As I mentioned last week, if we do run into any technical issues with that live stream feed, we'll instruct tech to try to let us know how quickly that may be fixed, but would likely proceed with the trial if we do run into any issue causing a delay with that. So at this time, then, I understand the state has a next witness to call. Is the state ready to proceed this morning?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right. Is the defense ready to proceed? All right. Then the state may call its next witness.
Thank you. The state calls Vince Kayakamanu.
We swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, whole truth, and the truth so help you God.
All right. Officer Kayakamanu, as you're answering questions, please make verbal responses for the record. Mr. Wood, you can inquire.
Thank you. Can you state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Vincent Keone Kayakamanu. Last is K-A-A-I-A.
Officer, I'm sorry. Could you talk a little more loudly right into your mic? I think we're barely picking that up.
Is that better?
Is that loud enough? Is it quiet? If you'll give us just a sec, we'll make sure that microphone's adequate.
You want me to start spelling the last name, see if that picks up?
I think the longer one will work better.
Yeah.
Anna,
Make a lot of noise. Can you shut it off for a second?
can you say something into that? Just to test?
Yes.
I think that's definitely better. Thanks for that. Mr. Wood, go ahead and just restart if you would, please. Thank you.
Okay. Can you state your name and spell your last name for the record?
Vincent Keone Kayakamanu. Last is K-A-A-I-A-K-A-M-A-N-U.
Thank you. What is your occupation?
I am currently the Chief Deputy of Madison County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you been in that position?
I started with Madison January of this year.
So 2024.
Correct.
What was your occupation before you took on that position?
I worked with Fremont County Sheriff's Office.
And how long were you with Fremont County Sheriff's Office?
Approximately 18 years.
Have you ever worked for any other law enforcement office?
I have not.
Are you post certified?
Yes.
With the title Chief Deputy, is there a specific title we should refer to you as?
That's fine.
Okay. Have you been involved in the investigation regarding Chad Daybell, Tammy Daybell, Tylee Ryan, and JJ Vallow?
I have.
In your current occupation as Chief Deputy of the Madison County Sheriff's Department, is it part of your responsibilities to oversee the jail?
Yes.
So they report to you.
The captain does, yes.
As part of your responsibilities in overseeing the jail, do you have an understanding of the jail intelmate or the phone call system?
Yes, I do.
What is that system and how does it work?
The Telmate system is a phone system that the inmates, while in jail, can make phone calls or FaceTime visits with their family, friends outside of the jail.
And how long have you overseen this at the Madison County Jail?
Since I've been there January 2024.
Right. Have you had experience with Telmate in other counties?
I have.
Did Fremont County use the Telmate system?
Yes.
And the Telmate system, does that include telephone and video visits?
Yes, it does.
On video calls, is the camera always utilized?
On video calls, the camera is utilized when the iPad is docked to the station. Once that iPad's removed from the docking station, the video camera shuts off and it goes into a phone call mode.
How do you ensure the inmates don't make calls on behalf of other inmates?
When someone's brought into the jail and booked in, they're given a specific PIN number that's to them. When they go to set that up through Telmate, they have to give their PIN number that they were given. They also take a face photo and they say their name approximately 3 times, so it's voice recorded.
Whenever an inmate places a call or participates in the Telmate system, is any information recorded or stored regarding that call?
Yes.
What is recorded?
The whole conversation, whether it's a FaceTime or a phone call, is all recorded from once it starts to when it ends.
And is the outside party required to provide name and personal information?
They can go on to what's called gettingoutofjail.com and put that information in. That allows them to put money on their books for phone calls or commissary.
How do you access the information that is stored on the Telmate system?
I've got a username and password.
Is there any way for you to edit the information that is stored on Telmate?
No.
Are you aware of any other agency being able to edit it?
No.
Where are the phones and tablets located in the jail?
In our jail system, we have what are called pods, and the pads and phones are located in the day room where all the inmates have access to that. The phone is connected to the wall, so if they're just doing a voice call, they need to stay out there. Like I testified earlier, they have that pad there and they need to stay there to do a face-to-face or FaceTime. But once that pad's removed, it blacks out and they can take that into their cell and talk, but it's only a voice talk.
How do you know the date and time of each call?
The calls are time-stamped.
Now, we've been talking about Madison County, correct?
Correct.
I want to call your attention to June 9th of 2020. At that time, was Lori Vallow Daybell an inmate at the Madison County Jail?
Yes.
And to your knowledge, Chad Daybell was not in jail at that time?
Correct.
Right. Your Honor, I'd ask that the witness be handed State's Exhibit 33.
Very well.
Detective, do you recognize State's Exhibit 33?
Yes.
What is it?
This is a thumb drive with a call on it.
All right. Do you know what day that call was made?
The call on this thumb drive was made June 9th, 2020.
All right. And who are the parties to that call?
Lori Vallow Daybell and Chad Daybell.
And have you reviewed the call on that thumb drive?
Yes.
Are your initials on that thumb drive?
Yes.
Did you put your initials on that thumb drive after reviewing that call?
Yes.
Is that call a true and accurate representation of what is stored on the Telmate system?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd ask that State's Exhibit 33 be entered into evidence.
Any objection? All right. And just one more clarifying point. Is that the only file contained on that thumb drive, Mr. Wood?
Yes, it is.
Thank you. Exhibit 33 is admitted.
Just real quick, Detective. When was the first time you heard this phone call?
June 9th, 2020.
Where were you when you heard it?
I was at the property of 202 North, 1900 East, Chad Daybell's residence.
Were you there for the search of Chad Daybell's residence on June 9th?
Yes.
And so you accessed this phone call from that location?
Correct.
Your Honor, may I publish to the jury?
You may.
This is a call from and paid for by
Lori.
an inmate at Madison County Jail. This call is subject to recording and monitoring. If you don't wish to talk, hang up now. Thank you for using Telmate.
Hi, babe.
Hello.
Are you okay?
Oh, they're searching the property.
The house right now?
Yeah. Yeah. And then MS Mark means will be talking to you.
Okay. Well, are they in the house?
No, they're out in the property.
Are they seizing stuff again?
They're searching. There's a search warrant, and so well, I just did them as with the kids.
Okay.
Yeah. So I tried to set up a call. I'm glad you called.
Yeah.
and we'll see what transpires.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
What do you want me to do? Pray.
What?
What do you want me
Yeah,
to do?
pray. Pray. Yeah,
Okay. What can I do for you?
I'm feeling pretty calm. I would call Mark, maybe, and just talk with him.
Have you talked to him already?
I did call him, yes.
So he knows what they're doing?
Yeah, it's like a call from somebody else I need to talk to. I love you so much.
Okay. I love you. Should I try to call you later?
I don't know. I don't know. You can try, yeah. I'll answer if I can.
Okay.
I love you, and we'll talk soon.
Okay, baby. I love you.
Okay, love you. Goodbye.
Detective, do you know approximately what time of day that phone call was made?
Around 11 o'clock in the afternoon.
Your Honor, the state will be recalling Detective Kai Kamani for other things, but at this time we have no further questions.
All right, Mr. Pryor, would you prefer to cross-examination or cross-examine at this time or save that for when he's recalled? Very well.
And officer, you've also are coming back. You've got a subpoena from my office as well to show up, and we've made arrangements for that. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Officer, Prosecutor Wood asked you where you were on June 9th of 2020.
Correct.
And you were at the Daybell residence. Is that right?
Yes.
Any idea how many other officers were there at that time?
I can't recall how many other officers and agencies were there.
Was it more than 10?
Yes.
More than 15?
Yes.
Okay. So more than 30?
Yes.
Okay. So 30 police officers from various agencies, obviously. Right?
Correct.
Right. And at that point, I heard on the tape where Mr. Daybell mentioned that he was at Emma's. Now, do you know who he's talking about when he says Emma?
His daughter.
Okay. And in relation to the house, where does Emma live?
At the time of this incident, Emma lived kitty corner, roughly from Mr. Daybell's home.
That would be what, the southeast corner?
The southwest.
Southwest, excuse me,
Yes.
my southwest corner of the property. But it
Correct.
was kitty corner.
Yeah.
Relatively close to the Chad Daybell's house, right?
Yes.
Within walking distance.
Yes.
So he was over there and there were no restrictions on his movement. Is that right?
Correct.
And he could come and go as he pleases.
At that time, yes.
Right. And at that point, you overheard him talk about a Mark Means.
On the phone call, yes.
Right. Okay. And on the phone call, he said he was going to talk to somebody else.
Correct.
Okay. Did you ever learn who he was trying to talk to, that other person?
I did not.
Okay. Did you have an occasion to be present when Officer Wheeler and Officer Hope were recording the interaction with Mr. Daybell?
I was not.
Okay. Okay. And at that point, if Mr. Daybell were to be leaving at that time that this phone call took place, he would have the right to do that, and there was no restriction stopping him.
Correct.
And he could go if he wanted to meet somebody or meet up with somebody, he'd have that opportunity.
Correct.
Now, would you agree with me with 30 plus officers showing up at your house that would cause you a concern? The average citizen.
To the average citizen, yes.
In fact, you probably agree with me that were you a street officer at some point with Fremont County?
Yes.
Patrol officer?
Yes.
And when a police officer puts on his lights and gets behind you and pulls you over, that's an emotional or at least an unnerving experience as well, right?
Yes.
So you would suggest that when 30 plus police officers show up at your house and search, that would cause you to have some concern, right?
I'd be nervous, yes.
More than nervous, right?
I'd be nervous.
All right. Okay. Now, Lori Vallow made mention that search again. And you're nodding your head. Had you been out there previously to search the Daybell property?
I have not been out there
Are
previous.
you aware as the manager, and I don't want to use the incorrect term, you are the supervisor of this case. Would that be fair? Or is there a better term?
Over the Fremont County portion of it, yes.
Okay. Are you aware as part of your investigation as to whether or not anybody else had been out in any of the law enforcement agencies on Mr. Daybell's property previous to that time?
Yes, I was aware.
All right. How many times are you aware that they've been out on his property prior to that time?
Prior to that time, I believe they were out in January of 2020 doing a search of the house.
Okay. Any other times?
Not that I can recall right now.
Did anybody from your agency ever go out to the Daybell property unannounced and search the property without a large group of officers?
Unannounced? No.
All right. How about announced and saying we're going to go out and just look around?
With a search warrant, yes.
Okay. And was that in the January occasion?
Correct.
There was no other occasion that officers went out there. Is that what you're telling me?
I can't recall what other dates we were out there.
Okay.
But yes,
But there were other dates that you were out there looking at the property. Is that fair?
correct.
Okay. A number of them?
No,
More than 5?
no.
Now, as part of your investigation of this case, you've interviewed a number of witnesses in this case. Would that be fair?
Correct.
You've interviewed Melanie Gibb
Correct.
several times.
One time.
Okay. Regan Price,
Yes.
how many times?
One time.
Zaluma Pastenes,
Approximately 3 or 4 times. I'd have to
Okay.
check my notes.
and then Garth Daybell, Chad's son. You've interviewed him a couple of times.
One time.
Okay. And where was that interview?
That was done at Rexburg PD.
Okay. And in that occasion, you showed up at Garth Daybell's house. Is that right? Or did you show up at the school?
We went to the school. Yes.
Okay. And at the school, it's where Garth was working. Is that right?
Correct. I wouldn't consider that an interview.
Okay. Well, we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
But at some point, you approached Mr. Daybell, and who was with you at that point?
Special Agent Ricky Wright.
Okay. Anybody else?
No.
And at that point, you took Garth and asked that he go down to the police station with you. Is that right?
No, not at that time.
Okay. But you mentioned that you approached Garth Daybell at the school
Correct.
and that the interview, or at least what you said may not have been an interview, took place at the police station.
So there was 2 different times.
Oh, okay.
One time we talked with Garth at the school to advise him of the findings of his mother's death.
Okay.
That I would not consider an interview.
Okay.
The second interview was done at Rexburg, or the first interview that we brought him in to Rexburg PD.
Okay. And when you say brought him in, where did you first have contact with him on the day you brought him in to the Rexburg Police Department?
That we made contact with him at his home.
And at that point, did he have a choice at that point, or were you taking him into custodial care at that point?
At that time, it was custodial care to come in and talk with us.
Okay, so he didn't have an option. He was going to go to the Rexburg Police Department. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, and then how long was he at the Rexburg Police Department on that particular day?
I'd have to look. I want to say a couple hours.
Okay. And at that point, did you ever talk to him?
Small talk until his attorney got there.
Okay.
Got him some McDonald's, some pop.
Okay. But at that point, there was nothing in terms of the interview with Garth on that particular day. Is that right?
Not until his attorney got there.
Okay. Okay. And do you have a recollection of how long it took for an attorney for him to get there?
I don't, off the top of my head. I'd have to look in my notes on that.
Now, we're going to be revisiting that in a little while in terms of the audio or the videotapes of Chad on June 9th. Did you have an opportunity to review the audio and the videotapes of Chad and Emma on June 9th?
I have not.
Okay, so you don't have any information about those?
I
That
do
wasn't
not.
part of your investigation in this case?
I do not.
Okay, okay. Other than law enforcement on June 9th of 2020 and June 10th of 2020, other than law enforcement, was there anybody on the scene at the residence on either of those days who was not a law enforcement officer?
We had the Fremont County coroner there,
Okay,
and a few cadaver dogs.
okay,
I believe that's it.
okay. Nobody else?
Not that I can recall at that time, no.
And were you there the entire time, or were you there just for a short period of time?
The entire time.
The entire time would have been from like 7 o'clock in the morning until when on the 9th?
We finished up about 4 or 5 on the 9th.
Okay. And the last part I want to cover, and we're going to revisit some stuff. I mean, we'll do this in pieces, obviously. When you were in there in January of what year again? I'm sorry.
2020.
Okay. When you were there in January of 2020, you also brought cadaver dogs, right?
Are you referring to the warrant that was done January 2020?
Yes, that's what I'm referring to.
I was not at that search warrant, so.
Okay. And I don't know why I thought you were. Do you have any knowledge as to whether or not they brought cadaver dogs that day?
I can't recall if they did or didn't.
Okay, Judge, that's all I have. Thank you, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Pryor. Mr. Wood, any redirect?
Just briefly, Your Honor. The defense spoke to you about nervousness. Correct.
Correct.
That's a normal reaction when you're pulled over by the police.
Correct.
Have you listened to multiple jail phone calls between Mr. Daybell and Lori when she was in custody?
Yes.
Was the tone of this phone call normal?
I would require some additional foundation for that, Mr. Wood.
Okay.
So I'll overrule the objection at this point.
Has it been a regular part of your investigation to listen to jail phone calls between Chad and Lori?
Yes.
And you've listened to many of them?
Yes.
Right. And in listening to those, would you say that the phone call on June 9th, that the tone of that phone call is different than their average phone call?
It's overruled with additional foundation. I will permit any recross just on this issue as well, though, Mr. Pryor. Go ahead, Mr. Wood.
Was it a different tone?
Yes.
Were you present on Mr. Daybell's property when Mr. Daybell drove away?
Yes.
And do you know what was taking place around the time on Mr. Daybell's property when he drove away?
Could you repeat that into your microphone, please?
I'm an object, Judge, on the basis of foundation.
Well, he indicated he was on location when this happened, so that's overruled.
Repeat that. Sorry.
Are you aware of what was happening on Mr. Daybell's property when he drove away from the area?
Yes.
What was happening?
We were looking for 2 bodies on his property.
All right. And are you aware of when he drove away if one of those bodies was being discovered?
Yes.
Who?
JJ Vallow.
Your Honor, I have no further questions.
All right. If you'd like, Mr. Pryor, I'll allow recross. But limited in scope to those 2 issues.
All right. Thank you, Judge. So you talked a little bit about the tone of the phone call was different. Is that right?
Yes,
And we talked a little bit earlier about the fact that there were over 30 police officers on a piece of property that day, correct?
yes,
So you would expect that there would be a little different of a tone when 30 police officers at 7 o'clock in the morning arrive at your home. And would that be fair?
that would be fair.
Okay. And then as far as what was going on when Mr. Daybell left, are you aware that Mr. Daybell was going to see an attorney that morning as he was leaving Emma Murray's house?
Objection calls for speculation.
I asked him if he's aware of it.
It's overruled.
Are you aware of that or not?
I was not.
Okay. And again, you didn't have an opportunity to review the tape from the videotape of Officer Wheeler or Officer Hope on that morning. Is that right?
Correct.
So you don't know the circumstances or the reason for why Mr. Daybell left his daughter's home kitty corner from the house and drove off, do you?
I am not aware why he drove off.
So to suggest that the fact that they found a body on his property and that was the reason for him driving off, you don't know what the reason Mr. Daybell drove off. There's another reason, or it could be another reason. Would that be fair?
There could be another reason, yes.
Right. All right. That's all I have, Judge. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So for this time, that will conclude the testimony of Officer Kaya Kamanu. He is the state's designated agent, correct, Mr. Wood?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, I point that out because the exclusionary rule does not apply for this particular witness who will be recalled, so you can go ahead and return and continue to observe the trial proceedings as well. The state may call its next witness.
We would call Detective Eric Wheeler, Your Honor.
Swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God.
Speaking clearly, please. You have a laser pointer right there if needed.
All right, before we begin with testimony, let me just confirm with Detective Wheeler here, who's now under oath. The court does have an exclusionary order in this case in effect. Have you observed or listened to any of the trial testimony that's taken place in this trial?
No.
Okay, so you have followed that. You haven't discussed any of the testimony with anyone else or reviewed that with anyone from the state?
No.
Very well. Mr. Wixom, if you'd like to inquire on direct, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Detective Wheeler. Good morning. Could you please state and spell your full name for the record?
Detective Eric Wheeler, ERIC WHEELER.
Thank you. And can you please explain to the jury, where do you work?
The Rexburg Police Department.
How long have you worked there?
18 years.
And what's your current rank?
Detective.
And what was your rank prior to becoming detective?
Patrol sergeant.
And how long were you a patrol sergeant?
Approximately 3 or 4 years.
And how long have you been a detective now?
3 years.
So prior to that, were you a patrol officer?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. And just very briefly, for the jury's sake, will you please explain to them what's the basic post-training that law enforcement receives?
So I've received my advanced and master certificate through Idaho Post, and so it's training that you have to go through, in service type training. You have to go through the Post Academy to get your basic certificate, and it entails everything from traffic, criminal code, search and seizure, laws of arrest techniques, firearms, those sort of things.
Thank you. And I want to draw your attention almost 5 years ago, back to June 9th of 2020. Were you involved in any kind of search that occurred in Fremont County?
Yes, I was.
What search was that?
It was the search warrant that we were asked to help with at the 202 North, 1900 East, Fremont County, the Chad Daybell property.
And what was the subject of the search?
My role in the search was to maintain scene security, safety, traffic and crowd control while investigators conducted the search on the property.
And just briefly help the jury understand more. Why do law enforcement need to maintain safety and security at a search scene?
Anytime we're doing a search on anybody's property or home,
there's a risk that's an inherent risk to the officers as they're conducting that search. And so whether that's agitated bystanders or the homeowners themselves. And so we just like to keep everybody safe by maintaining that control.
And we'll come back to your role in that capacity, but I want to fast forward a bit. Ultimately, did you help find anything on the property as part of that search?
Yes.
What did you find?
I found remains of Tylee, and then I observed the remains of JJ.
And very briefly, can you explain to the jury before we go back, describe where those remains were found for each of them relative to the property?
Judge, I probably need a little bit more foundation.
He was present at the scene. He just said he observed this on the same date.
Overruled.
So JJ was located by the pond area of the property, and Tylee was found near a fire pit just east of the property.
And for the jury's sake, relative to the home on the property, where are the fire pit and where are the pond?
So the fire pit's east of the residence, and the pond is northeast of the residence.
Would that be in the front of the property, the back of the property, the side?
The rear of the property.
So I'd like to come back now to your role in safety. So can you be specific with what you were assigned to do in that role as the search when you arrived?
So when we arrived, I helped maintain traffic as they were in the process of closing the road down in front of the house because multiple vehicles were going to be showing up. So I helped maintain some traffic control at the beginning. And then I stood by as detectives went and served that warrant to the occupants inside the home. And then my role was to just stand by and observe the occupants and their coming and goings as they were free to move around as they wanted.
And is that common in a search until something's found? Are the occupants allowed to remain on the property and sometimes move around?
Yes.
Prior to beginning your role on the search, did you have the opportunity to identify Chad Daybell?
Yes.
How did you do that?
Prior to this, just through investigation, through tips that we were receiving, even in patrol, we were helping field multiple tips that would come into the agency as we were looking for the children. And so through that investigation, I'd seen multiple pictures and images of Chad Daybell.
So is it fair to say that on June 9th that you were capable of identifying Mr. Daybell when you did?
Yes.
When you took your role, when's the first time let me withdraw that. Can you tell the jury what time of day, the best you can recall, that you arrived on scene to help with the search?
We arrived to the residence, I believe I got there just after 7 a.m. on the 9th.
And can you also let the jury know, were there other law enforcement agencies involved?
Yes, there were multiple law enforcement agencies involved.
Could you just briefly identify which agencies that were present?
The ones that I knew were present at that time were the Rexburg Police Department, the Fremont County Sheriff's Office, and the FBI.
Were there a large number of law enforcement present? Or
yes.
A small number?
Yes.
So when you arrived, you were given this assignment. Please recall and then explain to the jury, when's the first time that you personally got eyes on Chad Daybell?
So it was approximately 7:30 when I observed him leave the residence and walk over to his vehicle that was parked on the back driveway, the east side of his home. He got in the vehicle and then moved his vehicle over to the west driveway area and backed his car into that driveway on the west side of the house.
And if I could have you explain to the jury, Detective Wheeler, when he moved the car to the west side driveway, can you explain to the jury what would his vantage point have been relative to the pond and the fire pit?
He may have been able to see the pond area a little better from that west front driveway where he moved the vehicle to.
And so once he moved the vehicle, what, if anything, did you observe him to do?
He sat in his vehicle and was on the phone for quite some time. Just sat there in his vehicle.
So as you saw him in the vehicle making phone calls, while he was doing that, what's the next thing that you remember he did?
So I remember there were multiple times that I could, because I was trying to keep eyes on him as well as the west side, the front part of the house. And there were multiple times I kind of saw him awkwardly looking over his right shoulder towards that east or that northeast corner of the property where the pond area was. And that's at that time where some of the investigators and cadaver dogs were working.
And you just used the word awkwardly. Can you explain to the jury what you meant by awkwardly and what indicated to you that he was awkward?
The best way I can explain it is that for somebody to look over their right shoulder for a long period of time, and the reason I use awkwardly is because there was one time that he did exit the vehicle and kind of walked towards the rear of his vehicle and looked in that direction, and that's when I figured that he was interested or suspicious of something going on in that area. And I had made note to one of the other officers that was close by of that behavior.
And so when he got out and walked to the rear of the vehicle, based on your observation, would that have improved his vantage point back to the pond?
Yes.
What did he do next after he got out and walked to the rear of the vehicle?
So he got out, walked to the rear, kind of passenger side, a little farther on the passenger side of his vehicle, looked around for just briefly, and then got back in his vehicle.
What did he do next?
I believe he was on the phone for just a little bit longer, and then he drove over to kitty corner to his residence where his daughter was staying.
Were you aware that that was his daughter's home at that time?
Yes.
Which daughter?
I believe it was Emma.
What did he do when he drove over there?
I know that he had a conversation briefly outside and then had eventually gone into the home.
I assume, could you see him while he was inside the home?
I couldn't see him while he was in the home, no.
How long do you recall him being in the home?
Approximately an hour and a half, maybe.
Eventually, did you see him come out?
Yes.
What did he do when he left that home?
I, again, was occasionally looking over to see if he was leaving or was needing anything and coming back to ask questions. And so I would look over there. And one of the times I did, I was talking to another detective and he came out of the home and appeared to be in a hurry. He went directly from the home to his car, had some items in his hand, and then left the property. And I remember at that time that there were assigned detectives responsible for following him if he went certain places and just kind of keeping an eye on him. And so Detective Schmidt was one of those detectives. And so I mentioned to him, hey, Chad's leaving. And about that time, other investigators that were in the back of the property came jogging over saying, hurry and go stop him.
When you said leaving, did he leave on foot?
Sorry. So he got inside of his vehicle and drove going south. And I do remember the accelerating. You could hear the acceleration. And I thought, is he trying to run? I remember that was a thought that went to my mind. And then when the other detectives said, hurry, go stop him, where I was in a marked vehicle, I responded to that request.
In your experience as a law enforcement officer, is it common for someone who is the subject of a search at a home when they believe something is going to be found or is being found?
Judge, I'm going to object. This calls for speculation.
It's training and experience, Your Honor.
Judge, no, this is
Mr. Wixom, First of all, if there's an objection, let me think about it for a minute and respond before you start arguing against the objection. So please also for the court reporter, at this time, I am going to sustain that objection.
So you went and stopped him. Can you describe to the jury, you said he was, in your opinion, going fast, is that right?
Correct.
How far away from the home approximately was he before he was stopped?
It was right around the Fremont, Madison County line where he stopped. I couldn't give you an exact distance.
Did you make any personal contact with him when he stopped?
I did.
And what did he say or do?
So at the time, all I had was a request to stop him. I hadn't gathered any further information. The other detectives that had made that request were right behind me. And so I exited my vehicle and asked Chad to exit his vehicle and explained to him that that I had been asked to stop him and that the detectives were on their way to talk to him.
At that particular point, did you notice any change in his demeanor at all?
He didn't ask any questions, wasn't way shocked or surprised that he got stopped, and complied to the requests that I asked of him.
At that point in time, did any other law enforcement become involved in contact with him?
Yes.
Who was it that you recall?
At the time, his rank was Lieutenant Ball and then Detective Hermosillo. And there were a few other officers. I don't necessarily know their names or who they were that were at the stop.
Now, asking you to recount for us, what was the first thing that you remember law enforcement telling him?
So
Judge, I'm going to object.
Grounds.
It's hearsay.
Sustain.
Judge, may I argue that?
Go ahead.
It's not offered to prove the truth, Your Honor. It's just the effect on listener, which would have been Chad.
Well, but the point you brought up in the question, what was the first thing you remember law enforcement telling him? So I think it's just directly calling for hearsay. So it is sustained.
Was there some interaction?
yes,
Once that interaction occurred, were you ever instructed or did you ever take it upon yourself to arrest Chad?
I placed handcuffs on Chad.
And what did you do with him once handcuffs were placed upon him?
He was told that he was being detained right now, and he complied. I correctly put the handcuffs on, checked for proper tightness, double locked them, and then put him in my patrol vehicle.
During that interaction, are you aware, was he ever advised whether or not there'd been a find on the property?
Yes.
What was he advised?
That they had found JJ.
So in your vehicle, do you have camera system?
Yes.
Is there any camera system inside of the vehicle itself?
Yes. We have 3 different cameras that are linked together. One is inside where we put our prisoners, and then one is the dash cam, and then the one we wear, which is our body cam.
The one inside where you put your prisoners, what do you refer to that as?
The in-car camera.
Your Honor, at this time, I believe by stipulation, we have 2 proposed exhibits. One states 300A, the second is 300B. Well, first, just to offer to the court, they are a copy of the in-car patrol cam for this day for this officer, and then also the dash cam. I believe we have stipulation to their admission.
All right. On 300A, it's been offered. Is there stipulation from the defense?
Judge, there is for 300A and 300B, and as counsel correctly pointed out, one is the dash cam inside the vehicle. The other one is a camera that recording the same incident outside the vehicle by another officer. And correct me if I'm
agreed. Yeah.
So both of those by agreement, Judge, are being admitted or proposed admission.
All right. Exhibit 300A and Exhibit 300B are both admitted.
Your Honor, with that, may I have permission to begin to publish 300A?
You may.
Thank you. And Your Honor, while I'm preparing this, I would just further want to note for the record, we likewise have a stipulation. These videos are each an hour and 50 minutes. I only intend to play approximately 15 minutes. We have an agreement between counsel that The state can play what they wish to, and defense counsel can likewise play what they may wish to.
All right. If you do that, Mr. Wixom, if there is some identifying marker on there, either a timestamp on the video itself, so we can identify in the record precisely what portions were played, then please do that when you publish.
Will do, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thank you. If I can have just a moment, please.
There's more to come in the trial of Chad Daybell. Press subscribe so you don't miss any of our continuing coverage right here from True Crime Today and the Hidden Killers podcast.